I'm Jessica Harper, a 35-year-old single mom from Austin, Texas. My life revolves around my son, Ethan, and capturing life's raw moments through my camera lens. But 4 days in the ICU, watching Ethan fight for his life, changed everything, especially when my mother forced me to choose. Picture this: a sunny Saturday morning in Austin, the kind where the air smells like fresh grass and hope. My 12-year-old Ethan begged to bike with friends on Zilker Trail. I made him promise to wear his helmet, kissed his curly head, and waved as he pedaled away, all gangly limbs and fearless energy. That was the last moment of our old life. At 11:27 a.m., my phone rang. A nurse's voice, calm but urgent. "Mrs. Harper, your son's in critical condition." A car had swerved onto the trail, hitting Ethan. He was in a coma, head trauma, broken bones, internal bleeding. I don't remember driving to Del Seaton Medical Center. All I know is I didn't leave his side for 72 hours. Tubes snaked from his small body. Monitors beeped like a fragile lifeline. I talked to him about robotics, our dream trip to NASA, anything to pull him back. I barely slept, ate nothing, my world narrowed to his still face. Then on day 3, my mother, Diane, called. Not to ask about Ethan, but to demand I drive to Dallas to help with my sister Natalie's birthday party. "The doctors are handling it," she said, her voice sharp. "You're being dramatic. Family obligations don't stop." I was stunned. My son was fighting to live, and she wanted me to arrange party favors for Natalie, the golden child who'd always outshone me. Diane had spent my childhood comparing me to Natalie's perfect grades, her art gallery shows, my photography, my soccer medals. None of it was ever enough. Now, with Ethan in the ICU, she expected me to leave him for a cake and balloons. I tried explaining. "Mom, he might not make it." Her response chilled me. "You're choosing to make this harder than it needs to be." She threatened to cut off Ethan's college fund, the one safety net we had. It wasn't just a party. It was her need to control me, like always. I hung up, hands shaking, and deleted her number. In that moment I chose Ethan and I chose myself. This wasn't revenge. It was survival. But what came next tested every ounce of strength I had. What I didn't know then was Diane had promised to cover Ethan's medical bills. Bills I couldn't pay alone. But her help came with a price. My obedience. It wasn't just about Natalie's party. It was about her holding our future hostage, like she'd done my whole life. Have you ever had to choose between family and what's right? If this story hits home, stick around to hear how Ethan fought back and how I broke free. Share your story below, hit like, and subscribe for more real stories from Austin. Let's build a community of strength together. Growing up in Dallas, Texas, my childhood home was a picture of suburban perfection. Our house in Highland Park had manicured lawns, gleaming windows, and a front door that welcomed guests into my mother Diane's meticulously curated world. But behind the polished facade, life was a pressure cooker. Diane ruled with an iron grip, demanding excellence in everything. Grades, manners, even the way we set the table for Sunday brunch. Perfection wasn't a goal. It was the only acceptable standard. I was a good kid, never in trouble, always trying to please. I'd spend hours studying for a math test, hoping for a nod of approval, or practicing soccer drills in our backyard, dreaming of making Mom proud. But no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. My younger sister, Natalie, 5 years my junior, was the golden child. She had a natural gift for painting, filling our home with vibrant canvases that Diane displayed like trophies. Natalie's report cards were framed. Mine were skimmed with a sigh. She had a grace I couldn't match, charming family friends while I stumbled over small talk. Diane saw her as the embodiment of everything she valued: talent, poise, success. My father, Robert, was the softer side of our family. He worked long hours at his accounting firm, often traveling to Houston or San Antonio for clients. When he was home, he'd try to soften Diane's sharp edges. "Your mom just wants the best for you, Jessica," he'd say, his voice heavy with exhaustion. But his quiet support couldn't counter Diane's relentless standards. I remember one Christmas, I saved my allowance to buy her a scarf I thought she'd love. She thanked me politely, then set it aside to fawn over Natalie's hand-painted ornament. That moment stung, but it was just one of many. Our home was a stage, and Natalie was the star. I wasn't a bad kid. I got solid grades, played varsity soccer, volunteered at the local animal shelter in Dallas. But in Diane's eyes, I was always falling short. Her mantra, "Why can't you be more like Natalie?" echoed through my childhood, a constant reminder that I'd never measure up. By high school, I stopped trying to compete. I turned inward, finding solace in photography, capturing the raw beauty of Texas sunsets or stray dogs at the shelter. Those moments felt real, free from Diane's expectations. But even then, I carried her voice in my head, questioning every choice, every step I took toward being myself. Diane's comparisons were a shadow over my life, relentless and unforgiving. If Natalie brought home an A in art, my A- in English was a disappointment. When she won first place at a Dallas gallery showcase, my third-place soccer trophy from a regional tournament barely earned a glance. "Jessica, you could apply yourself more," Diane would say, her tone clipped, as if my efforts were a personal affront. Natalie's paintings were hung in the living room. My photographs stayed tucked in a drawer. It wasn't just achievements. Diane critiqued everything. My clothes were never quite right. Natalie's were always elegant. My attempts at conversation were awkward. Natalie's were charming. I'd overhear Diane bragging to her church friends about Natalie's latest art award, while my volunteer work at the animal shelter was dismissed as playing with dogs. It wore me down, this constant measuring against an impossible standard. I wasn't a failure. I was a solid student, a decent athlete, a kind person. But Diane's love was conditional, reserved for the child who fit her vision of perfection. Robert tried to bridge the gap. He'd slip me a smile during Diane's lectures, or quietly praise my latest photo project. "You've got a good eye, kiddo," he'd say when Diane wasn't listening. But he was no match for her will. Once, when I was 16, I overheard Diane tell a neighbor, "Natalie's going places, maybe even New York. Jessica, she'll settle for something ordinary." That word, ordinary, cut deeper than any criticism. It wasn't just that I couldn't be Natalie. It was that Diane saw me as less unworthy of the pride she showered on my sister. By my senior year, I stopped seeking her approval. I focused on my own path, spending hours at White Rock Lake, photographing the world through my lens, finding beauty in the imperfect. Those moments were my rebellion, my way of claiming a piece of myself. But even as I built my own identity, Diane's voice lingered, a quiet doubt that followed me into adulthood, whispering that I'd never be enough. There's a memory from my teenage years that still haunts me, one I've never shared publicly until now. When I was 17, I entered a Dallas high school photography contest, pouring my heart into a series of black and white shots of deep Elm street life. Musicians, vendors, raw moments of humanity. I was thrilled when I won first place, my first real validation as an artist. I begged Diane to come to the award ceremony, hoping she'd finally see me. But that same day, Natalie had an art exhibit at a local gallery, her colorful abstracts drawing a crowd. Diane chose Natalie's event without hesitation. "Jessica, you know how important this is for your sister," she said, as if my moment didn't matter. I stood alone on that stage, clutching my certificate, the weight of her absence heavier than the applause. That day, I realized my dreams would always come second to Natalie's in Diane's eyes. It wasn't just the ceremony, it was every small rejection that built up over time. Like when I'd spend hours editing photos for a school project, only for Diane to ask why I wasn't studying something practical like Natalie's art, which she believed could lead to a career. Or the time I organized a fundraiser at the animal shelter, raising money for stray dogs, only for Diane to call it a distraction while she framed Natalie's latest sketch. Those moments taught me to hide my passions, to shrink myself to avoid her criticism. But Texas gave me an escape. I'd drive to Lake Highlands after school, my camera in hand, capturing sunsets that painted the sky in fiery oranges and pinks. Those hours were mine, free from Diane's judgment. I'd sit by the water, dreaming of a life where I could be enough, just as I was. That dream kept me going, even as Diane's comparisons chipped away at my confidence. Looking back, I see how those years shaped me. They taught me resilience, but also a quiet fear that I'd never escape her shadow. When Ethan's accident hit years later, that fear resurfaced, making Diane's ultimatum about Natalie's birthday feel like a final test. Would I keep chasing her approval, or would I finally choose myself and my son? That choice wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming my worth, something Diane could never take away. By the time I hit my sophomore year at Texas A&M, I was desperate to carve out a life that was mine, not just a shadow of my sister Natalie's. Growing up in Dallas under my mother Diane's relentless expectations had left me feeling like I'd never measure up. Her voice, always comparing me to Natalie's perfect paintings or flawless grades, followed me like a ghost. But college in College Station was my chance to break free. I threw myself into photography, capturing the raw beauty of Texas, the rolling hills of the Brazos Valley, the quiet moments of students studying under oak trees. My camera became my voice, letting me see the world in a way Diane never could. That's where I met Michael Harper, a junior in engineering with a ROTC scholarship and a smile that made my heart skip. He was different from anyone I'd known. Michael didn't care about my mother's standards or Natalie's achievements. He'd sit with me in the campus darkroom, marveling at my photos of Austin street musicians or stray dogs at the local shelter. "Jess, you see things others miss," he'd say, his voice warm with pride. For the first time, I felt truly seen, not as a lesser version of someone else, but as me. We'd spend weekends driving to Zilker Park, talking about our dreams. His to serve in the army, mine to build a life where I could create without judgment. When I brought Michael home to meet my parents, Diane was predictably cold. "A military boy," she scoffed. "You're throwing away your future, Jessica. You should be aiming for graduate school, not settling." Natalie, ever the golden child, chimed in with a polite smile, but her silence said enough. My father, Robert, was kinder, shaking Michael's hand and whispering, "I like him, kiddo," when Diane wasn't looking. But Diane's disapproval hung heavy. At 22, I married Michael in a small Austin chapel, surrounded by his warm, welcoming family from Houston. Diane attended, her smile tight, criticizing the modest venue and my simple dress. "You could have done better," she told me later, as if love was something to be graded. Michael's parents, though, wrapped me in hugs, their Sunday dinners full of laughter and stories of their own Texas upbringing. They became the family I'd always craved. A year later, Ethan was born, with Michael's curly hair and my green eyes. He was perfect, a bundle of joy who made even Diane soften, though she couldn't resist commenting on my parenting. "You're holding him too much, Jessica. You'll spoil him," she'd say, her tone sharp. But with Michael by my side, I felt strong enough to ignore her. We built a life in Austin, simple but ours, filled with love and the promise of a future we'd chosen together. That future shattered when I was 29. Michael had deployed to Afghanistan, his second tour. Ethan was 5, obsessed with toy soldiers and video calls with his dad. We'd count the days until Michael's return, marking them on a calendar in our tiny Austin apartment. Then, one gray morning, 2 officers stood at my door, their faces solemn, a folded flag in their hands. Michael wasn't coming home. The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I don't remember how I got through that day. Only the weight of Ethan's small hand in mine as he asked, "Why isn't Daddy answering his calls anymore?" Explaining death to a 5-year-old broke something in me. I wanted to scream, to collapse, but Ethan needed me to be his rock. So I packed away my grief and focused on him. We moved to a smaller apartment in East Austin, closer to his school. I took a job as a school administrative assistant, steady but draining, piecing together a life on Michael's life insurance and military benefits. Every day was a battle to keep Ethan's world stable while mine crumbled. Diane's response to our loss was predictably controlling. "Move back to Dallas," she insisted. "You can't raise a boy alone, Jessica." When I refused, determined to keep Ethan in his familiar school and neighborhood, she doubled down. She'd show up unannounced with expensive gifts for Ethan, a new bike, a gaming console, things I couldn't afford. "Mommy can't get you these, but Grandma can," she'd say, her smile smug, planting seeds of doubt in Ethan's mind about our life. I'd find him staring at his new toys, asking, "Are we poor, Mom?" Each time I'd kneel down, look him in the eyes and say, "We have everything we need, buddy. We have each other." But Diane's interference didn't stop there. She'd schedule outings for Ethan during my limited weekends, then paint me as the bad guy when I objected. "You're too strict," she'd tell him, undermining my rules. Meanwhile, Natalie's life was a glossy contrast. She married a wealthy dentist, had twin girls, and lived in a Plano mansion straight out of a magazine. Family gatherings became Diane's stage to highlight the gap between us. "Natalie's girls are reading at a 3rd grade level," she'd boast. "Is Ethan still struggling with math?" Or she'd pass around photos of Natalie's European vacations, then glance at me. "When was the last time you took Ethan somewhere special, Jessica?" It stung, but I kept the peace for Ethan's sake. He loved his cousins, and sometimes when Diane wasn't critiquing me, we had moments that felt almost like family. My father, Robert, was my quiet ally, calling to check on us or slipping me encouraging notes when Diane wasn't looking. But the weight of loss and Diane's constant judgment left me drowning, fighting to keep Ethan's smile alive while my own heart ached for Michael. There's a memory from those early years of widowhood that still cuts deep, one I rarely revisit. Right after Michael's death, I wanted to honor him in a way that felt true to us. I planned a small memorial at Lake Travis, just Ethan and me, scattering wildflower seeds by the water Michael loved. I invited my parents, hoping for a moment of shared grief. Diane refused to come. "Public displays of grief are tacky," she said, her voice cold. "You should be focusing on moving forward, Jessica, not dwelling." Natalie didn't show either, citing a gallery event. Robert came alone, holding Ethan's hand as we tossed seeds into the wind. That day, I realized Diane would never understand my pain, or my strength. Her absence wasn't just about the memorial. It was a pattern. When I started freelancing as a photographer to supplement my income, Diane called it a hobby, not a career, urging me to get a real job like Natalie's husband. When Ethan joined the school science club, building his first robot, Diane dismissed it as child's play, while Natalie's twins were enrolled in elite art programs. Every step I took to rebuild our life, Diane undermined, as if my choices were proof of failure. But Austin gave me refuge. I'd take Ethan to Barton Springs, teaching him to skip rocks, or we'd visit the Thinkery, watching his eyes light up at science exhibits. Those moments were our rebellion, our way of building a life free from Diane's shadow. I leaned on Michael's parents in Houston, who'd call weekly, sending Ethan care packages with books about space and engineering, dreams Michael had shared with him. My co-workers at the school became a lifeline, dropping off casseroles when I was too exhausted to cook. Slowly, Ethan and I found a new normal. We'd talk about Michael, laughing over his terrible puns, keeping his memory alive without breaking. By the time Ethan turned 12, we were planning a trip to Washington, D.C., our first real vacation. I'd been promoted at work, giving us a little breathing room. Ethan was thriving in his robotics club, dreaming of NASA. But Diane's influence lingered, a quiet threat. She'd offer financial help, money for Ethan's school supplies or summer camp, but always with strings. "If you'd listened to me, Jessica, you wouldn't struggle like this," she'd say, her charity a reminder of my supposed inadequacy. That tension, that constant pull between her control and my independence, set the stage for the moment everything broke, when Ethan's accident forced me to choose between her demands and my son's life. It was a perfect Saturday morning in Austin, the kind that makes you feel alive. The sun was high, the air warm with the promise of summer, and Zilker Park buzzed with joggers, families and kids on bikes. Ethan, my 12-year-old, was practically vibrating with excitement. He'd been begging all week to ride his bike on the Zilker Trail with his best friend, Cody. His green eyes sparkled as he tugged on his helmet, promising me he'd stick to the path and be home by lunch. "Mom, I'm gonna race Cody to the bridge," he shouted, his voice full of that fearless energy only a kid can have. I laughed, ruffled his curly hair, and told him to be careful. Watching him pedal away, his skinny legs pumping, I felt a flicker of pride. Ethan was my world, my reason to keep going after losing his dad, Michael. He had his father's stubborn spark and my knack for finding joy in small things, like building robots or chasing fireflies in our backyard. That moment, waving him off, felt like any other day. But it wasn't. At 11:27 a.m., my phone rang, shattering the morning's calm. I was folding laundry, half listening to a podcast, when an unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. A woman's voice, steady but urgent, said, "Mrs. Harper, this is Nurse Karen from Del Seaton Medical Center. Your son's been in an accident. He's in critical condition." The world tilted. My knees buckled, and the phone nearly slipped from my hand. "What happened?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. She explained. A distracted driver had swerved onto the bike trail, hitting Ethan head-on. Head trauma, broken femur, possible internal bleeding. They were prepping him for surgery. I don't remember hanging up or grabbing my keys. I don't know how I drove to the hospital without crashing. All I could see was Ethan's face, his smile from that morning, now replaced by a terrifying unknown. When I reached Del Seaton, the ER was a blur of white coats and beeping monitors. A doctor met me, his face kind but grave. Ethan was in surgery. His skull had taken a brutal hit, and they were fighting to stabilize him. I stood frozen, my mind screaming one question. How could this happen to my boy? Cody's mom, who'd been at the park, found me in the waiting room. She was crying, saying the car came out of nowhere, that Ethan didn't have a chance to swerve. I held her hand, numb, as she apologized over and over. It wasn't her fault, but the guilt in her eyes mirrored mine. Had I checked his helmet enough? Should I have gone with him? Those questions clawed at me as I waited, alone, for news. Hours later, a surgeon emerged. Ethan was out of surgery but in a coma. They didn't know if he'd wake up. I felt my heart splinter, but I had to see him. They led me to the ICU, where my boy lay, small and broken, under a tangle of tubes. That was the moment my life split in two, before the accident and after. Walking into the ICU was like stepping into another world. The air was thick with antiseptic and fear, the hum of machines a constant reminder of how fragile life is. Ethan lay in a sterile bed, his face pale, his body dwarfed by monitors and wires. His curly hair was matted, his eyes closed, a breathing tube taped to his mouth. My boy, who'd been racing his bike just hours ago, looked like a stranger. I pulled a chair close, my hands trembling as I touched his fingers, careful not to disturb the 4 lines. They were cold, too cold, but I held them anyway, whispering his name like a prayer. For 72 hours, I didn't leave his side. Couldn't. Every beep of the heart monitor was a lifeline, proof he was still fighting. I talked to him non-stop, my voice hoarse by the second day. I told him about the robotics competition he'd been practicing for, how he'd promised to build a bot that could beat Cody's. I reminded him of our plan to visit NASA in Houston, how he'd begged to see a real spaceship. "You gotta wake up, buddy," I'd say, my throat tight. "We've got plans." Sleep wasn't an option. The nurses, especially Susan, a kind woman with gray streaks in her hair, tried to get me to rest. She'd bring me coffee, a blanket, even a granola bar, saying, "He might hear you, Jessica. Keep talking." So I did. I told Ethan stories about his dad, Michael, how he'd make goofy faces during Skype calls from Afghanistan, how he'd promised to teach Ethan to surf one day. I sang the lullabies I used to sing when he was a baby, my voice cracking but steady. The hospital became my universe. I ignored my phone, my job, the outside world. Friends texted, offering support, but I couldn't respond. My co-workers sent a card. Michael's parents called from Houston, promising to drive up. Their voices felt distant, like echoes from a life that no longer existed. All that mattered was Ethan. The doctors were cautious, their updates a mix of hope and uncertainty. His brain was swollen. The next few days were critical. They mentioned long-term risks, memory issues, physical therapy, but I couldn't think that far. I just needed him to open his eyes. By day 3, I was running on fumes, my body aching, my mind a fog of fear and determination. Susan noticed, slipping me a protein shake and saying, "You're his anchor, Jessica. But you need strength too." She told me about her own son, who'd survived a car accident years ago. Her words kept me grounded, reminding me I wasn't alone. I started noticing the small things. Ethan's fingers twitching when I mentioned his robotics club, the way his chest rose steadily despite the machines. Those signs, tiny as they were, became my fuel. I clung to them, refusing to let despair win. But even in that haze, I couldn't escape my past. Diane's voice, the one that had judged me my whole life, crept into my thoughts, whispering that I wasn't enough, that I'd failed Ethan. I pushed it away, focusing on his face, his hand in mine. This wasn't about her. This was about my son, my reason for everything. I didn't know it then, but the real test was coming. A moment that would force me to confront not just Ethan's fight, but the weight of my mother's control. On the 3rd day in the ICU, as I sat holding Ethan's hand, my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, assuming it was another well-meaning friend. But it kept buzzing, insistent, until I glanced at the screen. It was Diane, my mother, calling from Dallas. I hadn't heard from her since the accident. Hadn't even told her Ethan was hurt. I figured she'd call when she was ready, like she always did, on her terms. I answered, my voice raw from days of talking to Ethan. "Mom, it's not a good time," I said, hoping she'd hear the exhaustion and leave me be. But Diane didn't ask about Ethan. Not once. Instead, her voice was sharp, businesslike. "Jessica, you need to come to Dallas tomorrow. It's Natalie's birthday, and I expect you to help with the party." I froze, the words not fully registering. My son was in a coma, fighting for his life, and she was talking about a birthday party. I tried to explain, my voice shaking. "Mom, Ethan was hit by a car. He's in the ICU. He might not make it." Her response was like a slap. "The doctors are handling it, Jessica. You're being dramatic. Family obligations don't stop just because you're upset." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My boy was hooked to machines, his future uncertain, and she wanted me to drive 3 hours to set up balloons for Natalie. Natalie, her perfect daughter, who'd always been the center of her world. I pictured her Plano mansion, the lavish party Diane was no doubt planning, complete with catered food and Natalie's latest artwork on display. It was absurd, cruel even. "Mom, I'm not leaving Ethan," I said, my voice low but firm. That's when Diane's tone turned cold. the way it did when I was a kid who disappointed her. "You're choosing to make this harder than it needs to be," she said. "If you can't show up for family, don't expect our support. Ethan's college fund isn't guaranteed, Jessica." My heart stopped. That fund, money my parents had set aside for Ethan, was our lifeline, especially now with medical bills piling up. She was holding it over my head, like she'd held her approval my entire life. It wasn't just about the party. It was about control, about bending me to her will, even in the darkest moment of my life. I saw my childhood flash before me. Every time I'd shrunk myself to please her, every moment I'd swallowed my pain to keep the peace. I thought of Natalie, who never had to fight for Diane's love, whose every milestone was celebrated while mine were ignored. And I thought of Ethan, lying in that hospital bed, needing me more than ever. "Mom, I'm staying with my son," I said, my voice steady despite the tears. "You do what you need to do." I hung up, my hands trembling, and blocked her number. It wasn't just a phone call I ended. It was a lifetime of her manipulation. But Diane wasn't done. She sent a text, short and cutting. "You're letting your sister down. Again." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My focus was Ethan, his shallow breaths, the hope that he'd wake up. Susan, the nurse, saw me staring at my phone, tears streaming down my face. She didn't ask what happened, just squeezed my shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back to the present. I wasn't just fighting for Ethan's life. I was fighting for our freedom. Diane's ultimatum wasn't new. It was the culmination of years of control, of making me feel small. But in that ICU, with Ethan's hand in mine, I realized something. Her power over me was gone. This wasn't revenge in the way most people think. It was something deeper, a refusal to let her define my worth, my choices, my love for my son. I turned back to Ethan, whispering, "We're gonna get through this, buddy. Just you and me." I didn't know if he'd wake up, but I knew I'd never let Diane's shadow touch him again. Sitting by Ethan's bedside in the ICU, I was already stretched to my breaking point. My 12-year-old son lay in a coma, his small body tethered to machines, every beep a fragile thread of hope. For 3 days I'd barely moved. My world narrowed to his pale face and the rhythm of his breathing. Then Diane, my mother, called, shattering the fragile cocoon I'd built around Ethan and me. Her voice wasn't soft with concern or heavy with grief. It was sharp, demanding, the same tone she'd used my whole life to bend me to her will. She didn't ask about Ethan, didn't mention the accident that had nearly taken him from me. Instead, she launched into her ultimatum. I needed to leave Austin, drive 3 hours to Dallas, and help with my sister Natalie's birthday party. "Jessica, this is a family event," she said, as if Ethan's life hanging in the balance was a minor inconvenience. "You can't just sit there doing nothing. The doctors are handling it." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, trying to process her words. My son might never wake up, and she wanted me to arrange party decorations. I tried to reason with her, my voice cracking from exhaustion. "Mom, Ethan's in a coma. He's critical. I can't leave him." Her response was cold, cutting through me like a blade. "You're choosing to be dramatic, Jessica. Family loyalty is a two-way street. If you can't show up for Natalie, don't expect our support." Then came the blow I hadn't seen coming. Ethan's college fund isn't guaranteed. "You know we've been generous, but that can change." My heart stopped. That fund, set aside by my parents, was Ethan's future. His chance at college, at chasing his dreams of building robots or working at NASA. With medical bills piling up, it was also my lifeline, a safety net I couldn't afford to lose. Diane knew that, and she wielded it like a weapon, dangling our survival to force my compliance. It wasn't just about Natalie's party. It was about control, about keeping me in line, just like she had my entire life. I saw flashes of my childhood. Every time I'd swallowed my dreams to please her, Every moment I'd let her comparisons to Natalie make me feel small. I thought of the years I'd spent chasing her approval, only to be met with conditions and criticism. And now, with Ethan fighting for his life, she expected me to abandon him for a cake and balloons. Something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. I realized Diane's love had always been a transaction, a price I'd paid with pieces of myself. No more. "Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the tears. "I'm staying with my son. Do what you need to do." I hung up, my hands shaking, and blocked her number. It wasn't just a call I ended. It was a lifetime of her chains. I looked at Ethan, his chest rising and falling, and felt a strange peace. For the first time in 35 years, I was free. This wasn't revenge in the traditional sense, but it was defiance. A refusal to let Diane's control dictate my love for my son. In the quiet that followed that call, as I sat by Ethan's bed, a memory surfaced. Not a waking thought, but a dream that felt so real it shook me. It was the third night in the ICU, my body heavy with exhaustion, my mind teetering on the edge of despair. I dozed off for a moment, my head resting on the edge of Ethan's bed, when I saw Michael, my late husband. He stood in the soft light of our old Austin backyard, wearing his army fatigues, his smile warm and steady. "Jess," he said, his voice clear as day. "You're enough. You've always been enough. Protect our boy." I reached for him, desperate to hold on, but he faded, leaving only the echo of his words. I woke with a start, my cheeks wet, Ethan's hand still in mine. That dream wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a turning point. Michael's voice cut through the fog of doubt Diane had planted in me for decades. All my life, she'd made me believe I was less than Natalie, less than her expectations, less than worthy of unconditional love. Even in the ICU, her ultimatum had stirred that old fear. What if I was failing Ethan by defying her? What if I couldn't provide for him without her help? But Michael's words, even if they were just a dream, reminded me of the truth I'd buried. I was enough for Ethan, for myself, for the life we'd built. That dream gave me the strength to see Diane's threat for what it was. Not a loss, but a chance to break free. I thought of the times Michael had stood up for me, like when Diane criticized our wedding or mocked my photography dreams. He'd always said, "You don't need her approval, Jess. You've got us." Now, with him gone, I had to be that voice for myself. I looked at Ethan, his small frame fighting so hard, and made a silent vow. I'd protect him from Diane's shadow, from the conditional love that had scarred me. This wasn't about punishing Diane. It was about choosing a future where Ethan and I could live without her strings. That moment in the ICU, born from a dream, became my anchor, a reminder that my love for Ethan was stronger than any threat Diane could make. After I hung up on Diane, the weight of my decision settled over me, but so did an unexpected strength. I wasn't alone. The ICU, with its sterile walls and endless beeps, became a place of quiet miracles, not just for Ethan but for me. Susan, the nurse who'd been my lifeline, noticed the shift in my face after that call. She didn't pry, just brought me a fresh coffee and said, "You're doing right by him, Jessica. Keep fighting." Her kindness was a tether, pulling me back from the edge of despair. My co-workers at the school sent a care package. Handwritten notes, snacks, a small stuffed longhorn for Ethan, a nod to our Austin roots. Michael's parents, calling from Houston, promised to drive up as soon as they could. Their voices, thick with worry but full of love, reminded me of the family we'd built beyond Diane's reach. Friends from Ethan's robotics club dropped off a poster covered in messages from his teammates. "Get well, Ethan. We need our bot builder." Even Cody's mom, still shaken from witnessing the accident, brought me a homemade lasagna. Her eyes red but her hug fierce. These people, some near strangers, became my family when my own turned away. They didn't ask for anything in return. No conditions, no ultimatums. Just showed up in ways Diane never had. I thought of the years I'd spent craving her approval, only to find it in the quiet support of others. Susan told me stories of other families she'd seen in the ICU, of parents who'd faced impossible choices and found strength in community. "You're not just Ethan's mom," she said. "You're his warrior." Her words echoed Michael's from my dream, reinforcing my resolve. My father, Robert, sent a text, careful and brief. "I'm proud of you, kiddo. Focus on Ethan." I knew he was caught between me and Diane, but his message was enough. This network of support, woven from small acts of kindness, gave me the courage to stand firm. I wasn't just defying Diane. I was building a life where Ethan and I could thrive without her control. In that ICU, surrounded by people who believed in us, I found a truth Diane could never take away. Family isn't blood, it's who shows up when you need them most. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation, a choice to live for Ethan and myself, free from her shadow. 4 days in the ICU had stretched into an eternity, each second measured by the beep of Ethan's heart monitor and the shallow rise of his chest. My 12-year-old son lay trapped in a coma, his body bruised and broken from a car accident that had stolen our normal life in a single moment. I hadn't left his side, my voice hoarse from whispering stories, singing lullabies, and begging him to come back to me. I told him about his robotics club, our planned trip to NASA, the way his dad, Michael, would have been so proud of his stubborn spirit. My hands never let go of his, as if my touch could anchor him to this world. By the evening of the 4th day, I was a shell, exhausted, hollow, running on nothing but hope and fear. The nurses, especially Susan, kept me going with quiet encouragement, but the doctor's updates were cautious, their words heavy with terms like brain swelling and uncertain prognosis. I refused to let those words sink in. Ethan was my fighter, my boy who'd built a robot from scraps and dreamed of reaching the stars. He had to come back. That night, as the hospital settled into its eerie quiet, I leaned close to Ethan, my forehead against his small hand. "Buddy," I whispered, "you've got to wake up. Need you. We've got so much left to do." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, and started humming a song Michael used to sing to him, a silly tune about fireflies and summer nights. Then I felt it. Quitch. So faint I thought I'd imagined it. My eyes snapped open, my heart pounding. Ethan's fingers moved again, a tiny squeeze against my hand. I froze, afraid to breathe, afraid to break whatever miracle was unfolding. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. His eyelids fluttered, just a flicker at first, then slowly opened. Those green eyes, Michael's eyes, found mine, cloudy with confusion but alive. He couldn't speak, not with the breathing tube, but his lips moved, forming a single word. "Mom!" I choked on a sob, my hands cupping his face, careful of the wires. "You're here," I said over and over, as if saying it would make it real. "You're here, baby." Susan rushed in, alerted by the monitor's change, her face breaking into a smile. "He's waking up," she said, calling for the doctor. Dr. Patel arrived, calm but focused, checking Ethan's vitals, his pupils, his responses. "This is a good sign, Jessica," he said. "He's not out of the woods, but this is progress." I barely heard him. All I could see was Ethan, my boy, looking at me with eyes that held a spark of the kid who'd raced his bike just days ago. I kept talking to him, my voice soft but steady, telling him he was safe, that I'd never left him. His fingers squeezed mine again, weaker this time, but enough to tell me he was fighting. The room felt brighter, the weight of those 4 days lifting just enough to let me breathe. This wasn't the end of our struggle. There'd be therapy, recovery, challenges ahead. But it was a beginning. Ethan was back, and that was everything. In that moment, I knew my choice to stay, to defy Diane's ultimatum, had been right. This was my victory, not over her, but for us. The next morning, as I sat by Ethan's bed, still reeling from the miracle of his waking, Diane showed up. She hadn't called since I'd hung up on her, refusing her demand to leave Ethan for Natalie's birthday party in Dallas. I hadn't expected her to come. Part of me hoped she wouldn't. But there she was, striding into the ICU with Natalie in tow. Her face a mask of irritation rather than relief. Ethan was sleeping, his breathing tube removed but his body still fragile. I stood, instinctively shielding him, my heart racing. Diane didn't ask about him. Instead, her first words were a rebuke. "Jessica, you ruined Natalie's birthday," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You could have made an effort for your sister. This wasn't necessary." I stared at her, disbelief turning to anger. My son had just woken from a coma, and she was scolding me for missing a party. Natalie stood behind her, arms crossed, her expression a mix of discomfort and resentment. "It was a big deal, Jess," she added, her tone petulant. "Mom worked hard on it." I took a deep breath, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. My son was fighting for his life. I wasn't going anywhere. Diane's eyes narrowed, the way they did when I was a kid who dared to talk back. "You've always been selfish," she said. "You think this is just about you. Or family. You let us down." I felt the old pull, guilt, the need to appease her, but it was gone in an instant. I looked at Ethan, his small chest rising, and found my strength. "You get 5 minutes," I said, my voice firm. "Say something positive to Ethan or leave." Diane blinked, caught off guard, but nodded stiffly. She approached his bed, her voice unnaturally bright. "Ethan, Grandma's here. You'll be fine soon." Natalie muttered a quick, "Get better," her eyes on her phone. They left shortly after, Diane's parting glance full of disapproval. I exhaled, realizing I'd just drawn a line I'd never dared to before. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting Ethan from the toxicity I'd endured my whole life. Diane's reaction hadn't surprised me, but it solidified my resolve. She'd never see Ethan as I did, never value us beyond her own agenda, and I was done trying to change that. As Diane's footsteps faded down the hospital corridor, I sank into the chair by Ethan's bed, my heart still pounding from our confrontation. He was asleep, his face peaceful, unaware of the storm that had just passed. I brushed his curls back, marveling at how close I'd come to losing him. Then, in that quiet moment, Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me, his voice a raspy whisper from the tube's removal. "Mom," he said, pausing to catch his breath, "don't let Grandma make you sad anymore." I froze, tears welling up. My 12-year-old, barely awake from a coma, had seen what I'd spent decades ignoring. Diane's hold over me, the way her words dimmed my light. His words hit harder than any dream, any realization. Ethan, with his bruised body and fighter's heart, was giving me permission to let go. "I won't, buddy," I whispered, my voice thick. "I promise." His small hand squeezed mine, a gesture that felt like a pact between us. I thought back to the years I'd let Diane's criticism shape me. Her comparisons to Natalie, her conditional love, her dismissal of my dreams. Even in the ICU, her ultimatum about Natalie's party had echoed that pattern, trying to pull me away from what mattered most. But Ethan's words cut through it all. He saw me not as Diane's lesser daughter, but as his mom, his protector. That moment wasn't just about his recovery. It was about mine. I realized I'd been carrying Diane's judgment like a weight, even after cutting her off. Ethan's quiet wisdom, born from love, showed me I didn't have to. I vowed to shield him from that toxicity, to let him grow up knowing his worth wasn't tied to anyone's approval. This wasn't revenge in the way Diane might expect. No shouting matches, no bitter payback. It was deeper, truer, a commitment to live free, to build a life where Ethan and I could thrive without her shadow. His words became my mantra, a reminder that my love for him was enough. As he drifted back to sleep, I felt a fire ignite within me, not of anger but of purpose. We'd face his recovery together, and I'd teach him what I was learning. Family isn't about obligation. It's about love that lifts you up, like the love Ethan gave me in that hospital bed. Ethan's awakening in the ICU was a miracle, but it was only the start of a long, grueling journey. My 12-year-old, who'd been racing his bike on Zilker Trail just days before, faced a road of recovery that tested us both. After 4 days in a coma, his green eyes were open, but his body was still broken. Head trauma left him with short-term memory lapses, and a shattered femur meant he couldn't walk. The doctors at Del Seaton Medical Center laid out the path ahead. Months of physical therapy, speech exercises, and neurological checkups. I'd sit by his bed, holding his hand, watching him struggle to remember simple things, like the name of his robotics club or what he'd eaten for breakfast. It broke my heart, but Ethan's spirit never faltered. He'd grit his teeth during therapy, pushing through pain to take a single step with a walker. His face lighting up like he'd won a Texas Longhorns game. "I'm gonna run again, Mom," he'd say. His voice raspy but determined. Those moments were our victories, small but seismic. At home in our East Austin apartment, we adapted. I rearranged furniture to make space for his walker, taped his therapy schedule to the fridge, and celebrated every milestone, like when he rebuilt a simple robot from his club. His fingers shaky but precise. His love for robotics, sparked by dreams of NASA, became his anchor. I'd catch him sketching bot designs late at night, whispering ideas to himself, refusing to let his injuries define him. School was tougher. Ethan's memory issues made math his weakest subject, a battle. I worked with his teachers to create a tailored plan, sitting with him each evening to reteach fractions, my patience stretched but unwavering. Slowly, he improved, his confidence growing with every correct answer. I saw Michael in him, my late husband's stubborn drive, his refusal to quit. Ethan's physical therapy sessions at a local Austin clinic were grueling, but he tackled them with a quiet fire. One day, he took 5 steps without his walker, collapsing into my arms with a grin. "Told you I'd do it," he said, and I cried, not from sadness but from pride. His recovery wasn't linear. There were setbacks, days when he'd forget a word or tire too quickly. But each step forward felt like a reclaiming of the life we'd nearly lost. I poured everything into him, knowing every scar, every struggle, was proof of his strength. This wasn't just about healing his body. It was about rebuilding our future, one determined step at a time, free from the shadow of Diane's control. As Ethan fought to recover, I found a new kind of family, not bound by blood but by love and presence. My mother, Diane, had shown her true colors in the ICU, prioritizing Natalie's birthday over Ethan's life. Her absence left a void, but Austin filled it with people who became our lifeline. My co-workers at the school who'd sent cards during Ethan's hospital stay kept showing up, dropping off meals, offering to carpool Ethan to therapy, or just listening when I needed to vent. Michael's parents, based in Houston, became our rock. They'd drive up monthly, bringing Ethan books on robotics and stories of his dad's childhood, keeping Michael's memory alive. Their Sunday video calls were Ethan's highlight, his face glowing as they cheered his progress. Friends from Ethan's robotics club rallied around us, hosting a fundraiser to help with medical bills, their parents inviting Ethan to low-key hangouts so he wouldn't feel left behind. Even our neighbors in East Austin, people I'd only nodded to before, started checking in, leaving cookies or offering to mow our tiny lawn. This community, woven from small acts of kindness, was everything Diane's conditional love wasn't. They didn't ask me to be perfect or compare me to anyone. They just showed up, raw and real. I thought of the years I'd spent chasing Diane's approval, only to find it in strangers who saw us for who we were. This new family gave Ethan and me the strength to keep going, proving that love doesn't demand a price. It's not about obligation. It's about who's there when the world falls apart. In their embrace, I found the courage to let go of Diane's shadow and build a life where Ethan could thrive. In the midst of Ethan's recovery, I joined a support group for single parents in Austin, a step I'd never imagined taking. Diane's voice had always echoed in my head, calling me weak for needing help, but Ethan's accident taught me strength isn't about going it alone. Every Wednesday, I'd sit in a community center off South Congress, surrounded by parents who'd faced their own storms: divorce, illness, loss. Sharing my story, Ethan's crash, Diane's ultimatum, my choice to cut her off, was terrifying at first. But their nods, their tears, their quiet "me too" moments healed something in me. One woman, Maria, whose daughter had survived cancer, told me, "You didn't just save Ethan, you saved yourself." Her words hit deep, echoing Ethan's plea not to let Diane make me sad. I started journaling, pouring out the guilt I'd carried for defying Diane, the fear that I wasn't enough for Ethan. Those pages became a map of my own recovery, a dream taking shape. Maybe one day I'd turn them into a book to help others break free from toxic ties. The group taught me to forgive myself, to see my choice not as rebellion, but as love for Ethan, for the life we deserved. This wasn't revenge against Diane. It was redemption, a quiet reclaiming of my worth. Ethan's progress fueled that fire. Watching him rebuild his robots, I saw a future where we'd rise above her shadow together. A year ago, I sat in the ICU, terrified I'd lose Ethan forever. His accident shattered our world, but it also broke the chains of my mother's control. Diane's ultimatum, demanding I leave my son's bedside for Natalie's birthday, forced me to see her love was never love at all, just a leash. Choosing Ethan over her wasn't easy. It meant losing the college fund we'd relied on, facing medical bills alone, and cutting ties with the only family I'd known. But it was right. Today, Ethan's 13, his walker long gone. His robotics projects filling our East Austin apartment with dreams of NASA. He's not the same boy who raced his bike on Zilker Trail. Memory lapses linger, and math is still a fight, but he's stronger, wiser, carrying his dad's stubborn heart. I'm different too. I'm not chasing Diane's approval anymore. I've learned my worth isn't tied to her standards or Natalie's shadow. Our life isn't perfect. Money's tight and recovery's ongoing. But it's ours, built on love, not obligation. Austin's taught me family isn't blood. It's the people who show up, like Susan the nurse, my co-workers, Michael's parents. They carried us when Diane walked away. This journey wasn't about revenge, not the kind that burns. It was about reclaiming our lives, choosing Ethan and myself over a toxic past. Every step Ethan takes, every robot he builds, is proof we made it through. Not just the accident, but the weight of a lifetime under Diane's thumb. This summer, Ethan and I are planning something special, a trip to the Texas State Fair in Dallas. It's not just a celebration of his recovery. It's a reclaiming of a city that once held me captive to Diane's expectations. Ethan's excited to show off a robot he's building for the fair's youth tech exhibit. A clunky little bot he's named Zilker after the trail where our lives changed. Watching him sketch designs, his eyes bright with purpose, I see the boy who woke from a coma and told me not to let Diane make me sad. That moment still anchors me, a reminder that Ethan's strength fuels mine. I'm dreaming bigger too. My journal, filled with the pain and hope of this year, is turning into something more. A book idea, a way to share our story and help others break free from toxic ties. The single parents group in Austin keeps pushing me, saying my voice matters. I used to doubt that, thanks to Diane, but Ethan's belief in me, his quiet, "You got this, Mom," changed everything. This trip, this dream, isn't about proving Diane wrong. It's about proving to ourselves we're enough. We're building a future where love, not control, defines us, one Texas-sized step at a time. If you've ever had to draw a line with family to protect yourself or someone you love, you know how hard it is to choose yourself. Ethan's accident and my stand against Diane taught me that true family lifts you up, not pulls you down. I want to hear your story. Have you faced a moment where you broke free from toxic expectations? Maybe it was a parent, a sibling, or someone who made you feel small. Share it in the comments below. Let's build a community right here in Texas, where we support each other's strength. Your words could spark courage in someone else, just like Ethan's did for me. If this story moved you, hit that like button, it means the world to us. Subscribe to join our journey as we share more real stories from Austin, from Ethan's robotics adventures to the lessons we're learning along the way. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone fighting to reclaim their worth. Let's keep this conversation going, not for revenge, but for healing, for hope. Ethan and I are proof you can rise above, no matter how heavy the past. Choose you. Choose love. Thank you for being part of our story. We'll see you in the next one, right here from the heart of Texas.